we need your help. This is one of those call to arms, and this isn't to, to impress upon people how bad lead is and beat that same drum. It's to really be creative and careful in the way that we approach this issue, because it's a very emotionally charged issue these days, especially with the ban in California. So I'm going to give you a history of how we, the Peregrine Fund, came about our understanding of lead poisoning by studying the California condor in our releases here in Arizona. I got to be careful. I was in Texas and then New Mexico, and now I can say here again because I'm back home in Arizona. But then I want to tell you what we've done about it. And I think that's really what we need to focus on. And the old paradigm of conservation seems to be you do a good scientific study, you put it through the rigors of peer review, and then you get it published, and yay, I'm a scientist. But you really haven't done conservation. It's what you do with that science and how effective you are in conveying the meaning of that science as to whether or not you impart change within society that ameliorates the problem you identified with your science. That's what I'm going to try and impress upon you today. And my wife and I were joking that I think we're getting older now and getting up earlier and earlier, and staying up later and later is, man, I'm not very good at it anymore. So if I stumble around in my words, just hang in there with me. So here is the partnership, and I'm going to tell you more about that later. Yeah, I'm going to start here. With the condors, we had a very unique opportunity. As you probably know, the condors were down to 22 individuals in the early 80s. They were nearly extinct everywhere in the wild and in captivity. Thanks to a very effective captive breeding program, these birds were able to be reintroduced back into the wild, first in California and later in Arizona. So let's get straight to the numbers. For the numbers of birds we've released, hundreds now, we've had 69 cases of death where we've been able to determine the cause of mortality by necropsy. And I don't mean we, some scab biologists out there, I mean now all of they used to go to pathology in San Diego, at the San Diego Wild Animal Park, but now they go to Ashland. So the same place they do all the forensics for all the wildlife law cases, that's where these data come from. So this isn't our determination, these are actual official necropsies, and lead is our #1 cause of mortality. Our second leading cause of mortality is predation. And if you just look at those two in and of themselves, because they're far greater than any of the other diagnosed causes of mortality, look at predation is only 16. And if you take out of the equation these young birds that are hatched in captivity and then kicked in the tail feathers at between 6 months and a year, there's a very high rate of mortality anyway with new birds in the wild, in natural systems. But imagine how tough it is for these condors in the first year that are released from captivity. Half of these, a little under half of these, are from golden eagles. Well, you guys have an appreciation for golden eagles. You know, if you fly through their natal area and you're a big dopey condor, the outcome is not great. So the other one is coyotes. But both of those we expect, right? Predation is something that is acknowledged and accepted as natural. The beauty and the sadness of this, one is it's identifiable, and now we've identified what it is, and it's preventable. So that's both the bad news and the good news. The good news is the leading cause of mortality in this experimentally released population of condors in Arizona is lead poisoning, something we can do something about. Meaning that with all of these other causes of mortality, it suggests that survival is possible with these condors back here. And there's a lot of different reasons, and this isn't solely a condor talk, but there's a lot of available carrion out there. They are finding nest sites. Some of the nest sites they used in the Grand Canyon were actually used by condors 20-some thousand years ago. They have remains of condors and faunal remains of the species they scavenged upon in the same caves that these condors chose in the Grand Canyon. Pretty cool. I'll do some little anecdotes like that I spent 18 years, more than 18 years with condors. So lead poisoning, #1 for our observed mortality. Where's the lead coming from? We've done tests to identify, is this lead in water? Is this lead in food? Is it, I mean, we've had assumptions that from back in the day in California that maybe it was fallout from tetraethyl lead in gasoline. And that was very possible, and it was actually identified right there in Burbank at Los Angeles Zoo in those condors. They did have some lead from tetraethyl lead. But the lead that we've found tends to be in this form. Sometimes intact bullets. So when a condor comes in and it's lead poison, we can draw a blood sample in the field. We run it through an ESA lead analyzer. 3 minutes later, it gives us a lead level. And if it's high, we take it down to where we now treat the birds, and we have a treatment barn right there in Marble Canyon, and we can treat them with calcium EDTA and chelate the lead out of their system. If they're really far gone and they have a sour crop and peristaltic movement has become paralyzed, then we take them down, usually to Liberty Wildlife here, or before that, the Phoenix Zoo in Phoenix. So we x-ray the birds and we find these radiodense fragments here. We've identified some of these post-mortem in condors to find that it's both lead fragments and copper fragments. Well, if you think about when we first found this, we thought, where did they get this? Was this a deer that was shot and wounded? Could be. About 11% of big game or centerfire rifle harvested big game animals are unrecovered. But we had 80% of our condor population showing high levels of lead. That's not from a few deer that went missing. That's something more ubiquitous in the landscape. So we had a big question to answer here. Over the years, you can see lead fragments are the predominant type of radiodense lead that we find in condors, but we've also found lead shot. And I reloaded as a kid for dove and quail, and I knew that it was number 7s and 6s when I saw it in the x-ray, because you can look at it and measure the bones and get a ratio to the lead shot, and you see what size it is. And then, why in the world would condors, scavengers that focus on large carcasses, be coming across birdshot? Anyway, we'll get into all that later. We've also found 3 intact bullets. So question number 1, how much lead is deposited into a deer carcass or an elk or something like that upon impact? That was our first study. In 2003, we started the study with Granger Hunt. Some of you may know some of Granger's work back in the day with eagles. Well, Granger's been my science advisor at the Parish Fund for the last 18 years. We started this study and we went and shot 34 deer with all different calibers under normal hunting circumstances. So from everything from a 243 all the way up to the magnums, from the 300 Win Mag or the 7 Mag. We had all kinds of, everybody brought all the different guns we had, and we went out and said, okay, we're gonna shoot 30 some deer, and we want a single shot anywhere from 70 to 200 to 400 yards. Well, right in there with normal North American, Western North American big game hunting. 100% of the deer we shot with lead-based bullets contained lead. Not a surprise, we shot the lead into them. Therefore, any fragmentation that occurs is going to be somewhat in that carcass. And when we recover bullets, historically, we know, and manufacturers and gun clubs and gun enthusiasts talk about weight retention. My bullet retained 70% of its mass. Well, where did the rest of it go? That was the big question. And so this was an aha moment, not just for the deer that had lead in them, but then we cleaned the deer and took the gut pile and put it into a supplement trough, because that's what we had on the ranch. And if you guys know ranching, you know supplement troughs. Well, they catch a great, they do a great job of catching the gut pile, and then we x-rayed that. That was the big kicker. 90% of the gut piles showed fragments, contained fragments. 5 showed more than 200. 1 had 460 fragments from a single shot. That bullet that we recovered out of one of those animals only retained 64% of its mass. So now think about the possibility for the next study where we could recover every one of those fragments and then say we fully captured 100% of the bullet, and we can tell you how small the fragments were. And think about small fragments in surface area and how much more easily that lead can be assimilated into the system. The only deer that didn't have lead in the gut pile were ones we didn't shoot in the thoracic cavity. Because throughout the study it said, well, some people shoot headshots. Some people, I'm one of them. I don't like promoting that is in hunter ed, but hey, if you have the right situation, it's really nice to deal with an animal that's been a headshot. But I wanted to see what happened there too, so we did some headshots, and that's why not 100% of the gut piles contained lead. Makes sense. This is a picture of a gut pile. I made it a positive so that you can see the fragmentation. Now, you can actually see this is very likely the jacketing. And all the smaller stuff is lead and copper. And if you take the average percentage of copper jacketing versus the lead core of a bullet, you know what to expect for how much lead there is per the given bullet. And if you're lucky enough to recover the remainder of the bullet, you can actually quantify pretty easily for yourself going through the logical process that we did here by saying, wow, that's the lead that's left in that carcass. So therefore, any scavengers that consume this have the potential to consume that lead, and it has the potential to poison them. How did we not know about this for so long? This was something I've hunted my whole life. Granger tells a story about in the 60s when he had a bird that got sick and he figured out it was lead because he was harvesting, or he had accepted some food from somebody's that had collected starlings. Brian Much, a good friend of mine up in Sheridan, the same thing happened to him. Yes?
I have been to England and saw a menu on a restaurant that said, you know, woodcock, and it said may contain some shot.
Right.
So, and I've heard stories of people using lead shot to shoot the animals that they feed to their falcons and hawks.
Yeah.
And they say if there's enough feathers and fur that
it's cast.
With
species, and that could very well be, that you look at and I've talked to Pat Reddick about this at length over the years. It could be that some species, because they cast more frequently, maybe they're not as affected by lead because that lead is captured and cast. But for a condor, which might be uniquely why the condor is not more sensitive to lead, because actually they can tolerate up to 900 micrograms per deciliter, 9 parts per million of lead, and survive. Whereas some eagles might die at 100 or 75 micrograms per deciliter. Anyway, the condor is an obligate scavenger, and they are built, even in their bill structure, just like the, what's the lappet-faced vulture in Africa. It's the big, heavy billed bird that comes in and displaces at fresh carcasses and rips and tears big hunks of meat. It doesn't come in later like a turkey vulture that finds its food by smelling the putrid carcass. These condors are the ones that are ripping the big chunks of flesh off. Therefore, evolutionarily, they don't have the need to cast because they're not eating a lot of that stuff that would need to be cast. Maybe that's why they're uniquely susceptible. These are questions we're still trying to answer, but at some point you got to start at the basis and say, how much lead is there? Here's another example. This is a deer that we found by tracking the condors. Every condor has a radio transmitter and a number tag, and some of them have GPS tags, so we can go back retrospectively like 4 hours later and tell you, and go to the site where the condor had just fed. This is how we found this carcass. This was a headless deer outside of a deer season. It was part of a poaching case, so we were able to locate it. Here's where the bullet entered the neck of the mule deer, and here's where it exited. Look at the fragmentation. Not just where it hit bone, where you would expect to have the highest amount of fragmentation, but upon entry, even in the soft tissue and fur, that blew us away. And you think about, where do scavenging animals, even raptors that scavenge, enter a carcass? Usually eyes, ears, nose, anus, or these two new holes, where the advertisements for the meat are right there because it's a big red spot. Yeah.
When you're looking at this, is that only lead, or is that partially copper jacket?
That is lead and copper.
Okay.
And so again, if you look at the average, it's from, I think it's 13 to 30% jacketing per the amount of mass of bullet, depending on the manufacturer.
Right.
Some bullets, the bullet construction has everything to do with fragmentation, as does velocity, distance traveled, all those things. But basically, most of them are copper jacketed. Mm-hmm. Some are soft lead points. Some have a polymer tip. There's all different types of bullet. But this is everything that bullet was made out of, that flew from that rifled barrel into this animal. A lot of it was deposited here, and some of it obviously passed out the other side, like the back end, the core. So we also tracked and monitored where these birds are in a time of a year's span, and we took blood samples whenever we could. we saw there was a positive correlation to our hypothesis that it was going to occur at the big game season. It wasn't really a hypothesis. We had a bunch of birds show up, sick that time of year, and it coincided with that. And then we followed up with the studies and took blood samples all throughout the year and found what we expected is that the highest levels of lead, greater than 60 micrograms per deciliter at the time of testing, showed up in November and December, coinciding with our big game season on the Kaibab Plateau. Here's the first point and first opportunity we had to really mess up. We could have taken this and said, oh, it's hunting, it's deer, we got it. Well, but we don't got it. It's not everything. And more importantly, most hunters don't realize what I've showed you from this. And most of my hunting brethren don't read the scientific articles that we published on this. So how do we effectively convey it? That's what we're going to get to next. First thing we did is went to, many of you know, I read something about him today. He's a famous photographer and falconer, Bruce Talbert. Some of you know Bruce. Well, Bruce is a good friend of the Peregrine Fund. And at the time he was, I believe, an assistant director at Game and Fish. And we said, what are we going to do? We have all of these data and these images speak 1,000 words. We need to get this information out to the hunters. And they said, great, let's create a program. So many different iterations of that program came about, but here's what the remaining lasting result is. If you look through the hunting regulations today in Arizona Game and Fish's regs, both in the elk and pronghorn and the deer and general hunt, you'll see pages about lead poisoning. And you'll notice if you look back, if you happen to have your old ones, if you're a geek like me and I save them, you look through and you can see how they evolve through time. And how they evolve through time is we're not just now talking about condors and lead, we're talking about ecosystem health and lead. Because we know, you guys know, that a bird, I don't care if it's the apex predator, has an opportunity to scavenge and it's starving, it's going to scavenge. So we're learning a lot more about this. Pretty proud of Arizona. Utah, I didn't mean to have a downward turn in my voice there, but Utah was a little harder sell, which allowed us to understand that, hey, this is not a one-size-fits-all thing here. You might have condors in Arizona and Utah, but the hunters in Arizona versus Utah are different demographics. They're different people. And I thought, no, hunter's a hunter. We'll just share this information. Whole different thing in Utah. It took us a little longer in Utah, but they have also taken to a program that they have called Hunters Helping Condors, which is making it a little more difficult for us to expand from just the condor theme, because people in the north part of Utah, they say, well, we don't have condors up here, so why do we care? It's like, well, wait a second. Let me tell you about, do you know what an accipiter is? Yeah, they eat game birds. And do you hunt game birds? And if you wound a game bird and it flies a little funny, which one do you suppose that falcon or that accipiter is going to take? It's going to take that one. So there's a potential that it could consume a pellet. We don't have studies on them because nobody studies those particular game birds with transmitters and has a group of dorky biologists out there following them to find out what they die from. If we did, we might have some data on that. But let's just use common sense and think about it and think there's two ways to eliminate that pathway for exposure. Number one, you can use non-lead, but it is expensive and it can damage old guns, things like that. Here's another way. Don't miss, don't wound a bird, and always recover your carcass, right? A little easier said than done. Anyway, I got way ahead of myself. California, you may have heard, and I have to mention this both because it happened, but there was a partial lead ban in California on behalf of the California condor that was pushed through by, let's just call them groups that favor threats of litigation and using the science that groups like us produce. Yeah. And I haven't had any drinks tonight, so I'll be good there and stop. Anyway, there are different philosophies of how you deal, right? And this was thought by the groups who pressured this in California, this was thought to be a solution, that we'll just change the law and hunters will abide it. Right. I come from here, right around Bakersfield, and I can tell you that a lot of my hunting folks back home, family and otherwise, because there's a law, they'll never switch. And it's unenforceable. They can carry around a box that looks like non-lead 270 ammunition, but it's polymer tipped, and you can't tell that there's lead or copper in there. It's unenforceable. Anyway, You can tell my feelings on that. I am very biased. I'll say that straight up. I'm biased because I don't like the way this ban came about. If this was a ban like we had for waterfowl, where we had hunters supporting it like we did for waterfowl, I'd be all about it, because that would mean hunters understand there's a problem, they believe there's a solution, and they're willing to take action for that. That would be dandy, but we're not there yet. And then it has to work. So here we have a review of the three different efforts to mitigate this lead poisoning that is in a large part put on the map with condors in these three regions. We have and have maintained in Arizona, it's actually 87% is the average. This last season on the Kaibab, we had 91% voluntary participation. That is awesome. I have to give Arizona Game and Fish credit for that, because we came to them as the Peregrine Fund. We're managing a small population of condors. Many people have given up on the condor already and said, oh, there's a lot of reasons they're not surviving. We studied the hell out of them, found out, no, there's not a lot of reasons. There's one major reason, and Game and Fish came back and did something about it. I hope that history captures that adequately. Utah, like I said, a little slower start, but man, we've really stepped it up there with their support, and we've incentivized the heck out of it. We tell hunters that anything you can do, if you shoot non-lead ammunition, they'll buy you a free box if you're willing to shoot it. Well, also, if you haul your gut pile out of the field, we'll put your name into a drawing for an ATV or 5 different rifles, and the Peregrine Fund pays for that. So we're hoping that we won't always have to incentivize it like that, but hey, you got to get their attention some way, and this has been a way to do it. California, they've had a ban within the range of the condor since 2008. Come July 2019, it will be banned for all types of hunting. Worse yet, and again, this is a personal opinion, worse yet, you can't even buy ammunition online anymore. You can't have it shipped to you in California. Imagine how difficult that's going to be to find non-lead ammunition and be able to purchase it. A lot of problems to deal with there. All of this has happened, yet roughly 50% of all diagnosed condor deaths continue to be lead poisoning. Now, I had a gentleman at the, was it the Eagle? I wish Jamaica was here. I think it was the Eagle meet. He said, well, your hypothesis must be off, because if you have that high a rate of participation, why are the condors still being exposed? There must be other sources. Well, let me point out to you something here. See this? This is deer hunters from the Kaibab Plateau. We had a condor go to Wyoming last year. We've had condors in New Mexico. We've had condors in Nevada. We've had condors in up near Salt Lake City. Condors don't just eat deer. They don't just eat carrion during deer season. There's all these other sources of food on the ground, many of which aren't even hunted species. So I'm going to summarize, and the same thing goes for Utah deer hunters. This isn't Utah all hunters in southern Utah, this is deer hunters. And in California, there was a survey done, and I'll just address it here because I've been beaten up online about this, and they say, well, Game and Fish officers did a survey with their hunters after the 2008, and they didn't have a real survey that they filled out. They just asked, are you using non-lead? Did any of you speed in the last week? I couldn't believe that they stated that. They said 99% of hunters said they use non-lead. It's like, well, that's just straight bullshit. I'm sorry. No. Anyway, we still have this method of measuring lead in the wild because we track these condors so intensively. And 50% of diagnosed deaths are still lead. So let me give you the summary in the way I talk about lead in the environment, and to explain this. Anytime an animal is shot and whose remains are left in the field, the potential for lead exposure exists based on what we know from our ballistic studies. And so a large part of what I do today is run around to hunting groups, to small groups, gatherings like this, room full at a time. And sometimes we go out to the field and we'll shoot ballistics gel. And we show people what's the most standard manufactured bullet for 30-06 or 30-30, Remington Core-Lock, Remington or Winchester PowerPoint. We shoot them into ballistics gel and we show people the fragmentation. Then we'll take the newer contemporary non-lead counterparts to those same calibers and same bullet weights, and we shoot the non-lead, and then we take them and put them on a scale. And we say, here's the difference. This one lost 30 to 40% of its mass. Here it is captured in this water tub. or in this ballistics gel. So would you knowingly feed that to wildlife? Would you knowingly make those lead fragments part of the food chain? Now, I'm not going to get big into the human side of this because we've been raked over the coals for saying to our fellow hunters, would you knowingly consume lead ammunition? I get in trouble when I say that in the media. They say, the NRA and NSSF, groups like that, they say we're fear-mongering. I was like, well, you should recognize it, but I'm not fear-mongering. I'm just saying that this is lead that is in the food that we leave in the field. And yes, we take some of it home. I say that as a family man. And I'll tell you, my progression through it wasn't real logical either. And my wife's sitting back here, and one of my youngest daughter, and when my daughters were infants, I was up doing that study with Granger in Wyoming, and on every third day, we had so many deer killed and processed that they had to wait until they could be placed at all different processors, because we also wanted to x-ray the packaged meat after it was packaged. So we wanted 30 different processors for those 30 different deer. And so we had to wait 2 days and get the drivers to be able to catch up. So what did we do? We hauled butt up to Montana and went bird hunting. So I called my wife. I was like, oh man, you wouldn't believe this. They got sharp-tailed grouse. We hit the last day of the sage grouse season. We got Hungarian partridge. We shot pheasant. It is awesome. I got all this game meat to come home. She said, what'd you shoot it with? I said, my 12 gauge and my 410. No, dummy, what'd you shoot it with? Oh, yeah, same thing I've always used, I guess. She goes, lead. I was like, yeah. She's like, we're not feeding that to the girls. I was like, yeah, you're right. So I'm not just beating people up for something I don't understand. I did that too. And so then at that point I said, okay, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to go all non-lead. And I still harvest just as many birds, and I'm also hellaciously competitive. So, yeah.
Doesn't Arizona still do that program if you get drawn and
yes, sir.
They give you ammo?
That was the one. That's the participation we're talking about right there.
Yeah.
But that's on the Kaibab.
Yeah.
You know, we still haven't expanded. It's this political process is slow, to catch on. Now we're talking to the International Association of Hunter Education Instructors, and they're saying maybe we should make a module that goes into Hunter Ed about lead. But boy, say that in front at one of the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies meeting, and some states will flat out bang their fists on the table and say, not in my state, you won't. Okay, yeah. Let's back up and talk about this some more. Would you knowingly eat lead? No, that's not how I do it. But sometimes you just like, okay, sooner or later. Yeah, right. I've done this all my life. I've eaten game meat all my life. I'm fine. Am I fine? I don't know if I'm fine. But would I feed it to my kids? Knowingly. I was about to, but no, we're not now. But that's me personally. All right, more science on other things. What about small game? Since Granger's paper was published in 2006, there's been a ton of other studies out there that show now they're quantifying, they're taking carcasses, not just counting radio-dense fragments in an x-ray, they're now digesting these in enzymes and actually calculating the micrograms of lead per kilogram of squirrel. And then saying for the known amounts of squirrels fed upon by different bootios and then fed to their nestlings, what is the probability that those nestlings are being, they're taking this to a whole nother level. That's not what Polly Buskirk did, but the Garth Herring study, I think I have the next one here. Yeah, this one, ground squirrel shooting and potential lead exposure of breeding avian scavengers. You talk about the fine comb here. This is phenomenal compared to what we did with, hey, and when I go to, I'm not at SHOT Show this week because I've been there every other year for a while now, and I don't know any other ways you can say, hey, this isn't high science with, big statistics. This is, we shot some stuff and we x-rayed it. Yeah. There it is. See what you get. Anyway, this is taking it to a whole nother level, so I have to compliment those folks there. But it's the same old stuff. The center pivot where they go out, some people come out and will actually pay ranchers. It used to be the other way. Ranchers would pay us to go out and shoot their squirrels. Now people are paying in some places in these center pivots to go shoot. And even in the articles that they write about it, they're bragging about, oh yeah, and it's like ringing the dinner bell. After we get done shooting, all the ravens and eagles and everything comes in, and they're proud of it because they're feeding those critters. They just don't know the back end of the story yet. So we could jump straight in the middle of their stuff and say, look, retards, or you can't do that these days, right? Or you rednecks, we can't do this. But that's not the way to do it. You have to be very careful in the way we go about it. So again, me being a redneck, I can say, hey, my redneck brethren, let's think about this. What about coyote varmint hunting? What if you're fur hunting? What if you've done it, you're how many generations have done it for fur hunting? You don't want to blow a big hole in that carcass, so you use a bullet that fragments drastically, because that way the bullet doesn't exit the other side. Well, luckily there are now some of those non-lead bullets that are frangibles, and they have the same impact, they have the same effect. Of course, in some cases they're more expensive. What about other raptors? We've put out some game cameras on the Kaibab Plateau on gut piles with game and fish, and we find eagles, and this one always gets the falconry community. An adult goss.
Of course.
Feed on a gut pile. Yeah, of course, but if you had asked this question at a rendezvous up at the Peregrine Fund with all the old-time falconers, say, what do you suppose the likelihood, the probability of an adult goss, scavenging a gut pile? I bet there'd been, no. Yeah, anyway, I get a kick out of showing that one. So here's another one of the things we're after. We're also, now that we have these non-lead programs going in Arizona and Utah, and there's a lot of popularity and notoriety about it, the thing in California with the ban, we're having some groups reach out to us, like White Sands, New Mexico, and they're saying, hey, we harvest 600 to 1,000 oryx, depending on the year, any given year, and you guys told us how many eagle pairs we have in our range there. Do you suppose they're being lead poisoned? And I said, well, what you're talking about is a huge study if you want to do it to the level that we did condors. But I think what's most important is that you capture it in photography. That way you can see, the hunters can see the relationship there. So let's capture it the first year, and we'll quantify rates of visitation for all scavengers that come to those gut piles. We'll create a little white paper, and they'll then send that back out to your hunters. We also queried the hunters to ask what kind of bullets they're shooting. Are they shooting lead or non-lead? Do they even know the difference? A lot of hunters don't. And then how many shots they took, how many hits they had, how far the animal traveled, all these metrics that we can then use to really inform what we think our opinions are of ourselves and our hunting tradition, to say, hey, actually, some of these non-lead bullets, because they don't break down, they're very effective and efficient at taking large game. They were developed for hunting in Africa for that very reason, because you don't want to tick off a Cape buffalo, for example. So you don't want a bullet that's going to expand and fragment upon impact. You want it to blow clean through, even if it hits that humerus or something. So that's another program that we're working on now, and we're getting some cool footage. Look at that coyote.
Wow.
Step back. So think about this impact. Think about how the paper, one of those studies that I showed you a moment ago, you can hand that to a hunter, or you can hand this to a hunter and say, this is what's happening out in the field around your gut pile. A lot of this work, you can see this is one of our displays here. This is Dave Garcelon's group out of California, Institute for Wildlife Studies. They've been doing outreach there forever. They've got ballistics gel here. This is what it looks like. But it was only one or two of us. Here's another guy that used to work for Dave. Now he's the non-lead hunting education coordinator at Oregon Zoo. But there's just one guy or gal here and there talking about this stuff and working directly on this issue. And it's a hot topic because of the politics of it. So we're all collaborating over the last 2 decades, but what do we do to take it to the landscape scale? How do we move to that next phase in Arizona of talking about all hunting and to all hunters? Arizona Game and Fish, I think I've blown their horn enough here. IWS, just a couple of full-time employees dedicated to this. There's an ever-increasing body of scientific knowledge. You do a search on this today in Google Scholar, you're going to come up with loads of paper. I mean, you can do a lit review like that. I just did one for my PhD here a couple of years ago, and haven't done anything since we tried to launch this partnership. I believe, and I think we all want to think we're a part of a new paradigm in conservation. You know, any field that we work in, we want to think we're a part of something special. But there are some challenges out there, folks, that do make this different. You can't just publish the papers anymore and have the managers and the policymakers take that and go forth to the public and have everything come out hunky-dory. You have to be terribly creative, and I think we're onto something with this. Single species efforts have been taking a beating forever. The millions of dollars that we spend on condors compared to other species, including that of the peregrine falcon, as just for the peregrine fund, we take a beating on that sometimes. It has to relate to the audience and where they are. And we're learning as we go. It's not unique to condors, however, we've learned a lot because of our work with condors. It's not limited to big game hunting. It's not limited to specific regions. Even if I'm a rancher, as I worked for ranchers as a kid, and you had a moribund animal out there that had a broken leg or it was sick and needed to be put down, you didn't call the vet to have him come out the 5-hour drive to give it a shot. You put it down. What'd you put it down with? Your sidearm. What was it loaded with? What it was always loaded with? Probably lead. We have to inform people as to this potential, and then you have to give them a reason, and you have to give them the means to make that transition. I've said enough about that, but this I'll say a lot about, the backfire effect of the ban. You know, I have a lot of groups, and they're well-intended, and I won't say their names, but Audubon, NRA, you know, Sierra Club, Humane Society, they're well-intended. They really are. But some of the campaigns that have been launched have done a lot of damage that we have to dig out from under every time we want to have this conversation with our fellow hunters. That's where I'm going to ask you guys as hunters. And I know as falconers, we have a history of, and I say we because I work with peregrine fund. I'm not yet a falconer, but we have a tendency to kind of lay low, right? Because we've not always had the greatest attention of being falconers, or whether it's varmint hunting or falconers. You know, we've had some persecution over the years. But you guys are ambassadors. You know the effect that it has when you have a bird on the fist and somebody says, what is that? And you take the time to tell them what it is. And you take the time so they can understand that. You have an opportunity there. And I hope to be able to call on you guys as well, as I said at the NAFA meeting in Lubbock. But we're avoiding this heavily by working with our fellow hunters. And we know enough about today where anytime it's about guns and Second Amendment rights, this can very quickly be made to look like an attack on our rights, and this is another way to get our guns. Except when I'm the one talking about it and they go, that redneck? No, he's okay, he's with us. The way we do it though, beyond just me being a good old boy biologist, is we appeal and connect to values and benefits that are already established. This whole new movement, you look at some of the hunters out there today that are thought leaders like Randy Newberg or Stephen Ranella with Meat Eater. You look at the local war food movements, things like that. We have a role to play there in informing what those people know about the traditions of falconry, our hunting heritage, our heritage in wildlife conservation. So see, this is well bigger than me becoming a raptor biologist. This is me being a social scientist, which I didn't study, but that's the way we do it. We mostly do it in small groups like this, and we mostly do it in regions here and there, but we need to be doing it everywhere. So that gets us to this partnership. This is the goal of the partnership, and now I sound like I'm trying to sell you a vacuum. But we put a lot of effort in this logo, and I hope it demonstrates the entire package. This is the back of a bullet casing. It could be shotgun or center fire rifle, it doesn't matter. At the primer is our history in conservation and hunting heritage, and the future of hunting heritage and conservation. And the conservation is linked to by not only managing species that we hunt, but also those other species out there, so that we have the entire ecosystem. And it's all linked together with partnership. Isn't that a happy little story? We worked worked our tail off because I wanted this to mean something to people that said, wait a second, what does non-lead mean? I get that still. We didn't think that all the way through. But we were at a booth for 3 days, and one of our partnering booths person came over and said, what does non-lead exactly mean? Got a lot of work to do in some places. All we have so far, I shouldn't say it like that. What we have so far is something very clear and to the point. We wrote a resolution, and this is we've labeled it a partnership to conserve wildlife and hunting heritage. So it's wildlife conservation and hunting heritage combined. It's not just one of those endangered species movement. The founders of this are the Peregrine Fund, the Institute for Wildlife Studies, and the Oregon Zoo. The first round of partners we had, to no surprise, Arizona Game and Fish, got a fancy new logo, Utah Division of Natural Resources, and this is the new one, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. We've actually signed we wrote a proposal, and we have a grant from them to start a non-lead hunting education program in Oregon. We also had, this one kind of doesn't fit, which one doesn't fit? National Wild Turkey Federation. They supported our lead reduction program for the deer hunt on the Kaibab with Game and Fish years ago. So they seemed like a logical first step to say, hey, would you guys also support this on an ecosystem scale that we're trying to do for this partnership? And they said, yeah, not only will we support it, we'll kick you $1,000 a year, and we'll run it up the flagpole to national to see if they might bite. Wow, that was awesome. So we have 3 different levels of partnership. One is you can just be in support of. The other one is you can be a supporter, and the other one is a full partner. So the partner has all of the above. But this is the full accoutrement now. We have Arizona Deer Association, who's in support of this partnership. Arizona Elk Society, First Light. Yes, we went with a hunting clothing manufacturer, and yes, we're hoping for many years of pro deals there. But beyond that, they're also donating products for prizes, for incentives, because people recognize that. So we've talked to Sitka, we're talking to anybody who has a name for a product that people are already buying, and they're already in that vein, to say, hey, would you help us? Can you kick us a jacket so we can auction it off for people that are, or not auction it off, but raffle it off. We also have ArizonaMuleDeer.org, and look at this. We just signed NAFA after the Lubbock meet, so pretty excited about where we're headed there. I'm not going to belabor this and finish through the rest of these slides, but I will end on this, and I think I have it here. We just went live July 9th last year, and if you look back and type in non-lead hunting, North American Non-Lead Partnership, and do a Google search and look up this press release and see what state directors are saying. We didn't just get somebody from, a lowlinger like me in the Peregrine Fund, for example, to talk about what they think about this. State directors commented themselves on this partnership. I hope that means something for the future. We want to engage our fellow hunters first, and agencies. That's where we're headed first. We want the agencies and the hunt groups. We've had a lot of big groups like American Bird Conservancy. They hit us up and said, we want to be a partner. Audubon, the chapters of Audubon, we want to be a partner. I said, not yet. Because if we add all those groups first, and then we go to the hunting groups, how do you successful you think we'll be? So we're focusing on agencies and hunting groups first, and it's been slow. But we are talking to groups. We have the ear of Boone and Crockett and some other large groups like that. So we're hosting and booths, Birds on the Fist. Like I said, we're using everything. Backcountry Hunter and Anglers is a really up and coming, pretty powerful group right now, and they've given us booth space each year. And last year, and I'll leave on this because I think this is, no, I have one more slide. Last year at BHA, we were looking at how outfitters, they donate hunts for the raffles at the end of the night, or at the banquet, right? And so we thought, what could we donate that would be cool? And I said, well, hell, we have all these falconers. Let's donate a hunt to go hunting with a falconer. It was the top billing. $4,300.
Wow.
Yeah. And so now BHA, who had tolerated us and kind of patted us on the head, we said, well, we're the Peregrine Fund and we're hunter conservationists and we want to have a booth about this new partnership and we want to show people about non-lead, and they're going, I don't know. Hey, after they raised $4,300 for the trip to go hunting with a falconer, they're like, Peregrine Fund, we love you guys. So that sounds bad, doesn't it? I mean, that we're using that technique, but hey, it's what gets people's attention. What's important is that we capitalize on that opportunity. So we did a video on the hunt, and the guy who won the hunt also he owns a backpack company. Anyway, the connections just started growing, and it's like dendrites now. And we're hoping to show the video at this next year's BHA Rendezvous, and I hope we break $10,000 of donations for it. And think about what it'll do, not just for our issue with, we hardly even mention this. What we mention is falconry, one of the oldest traditions of hunting on the books, still being practiced today. And thanks to things like public lands, thanks to things like game laws, we actually have the opportunity to do this. That's what I hope this turns into someday, is adding another cog in that. I don't know if you have ever heard to Hunt to Eat. It's a company that they do state-sponsored shirts, and they have like they'll have a state shirt that's known for, say it's known for their big elk. So they'll combine the flag and the elk, and they do it and they donate to conservation. They did this shirt on their own. Look at it. Well, it's a terrible picture.
You're wearing one.
Oh, yeah, thanks, my wife. I have a lot of these, so I wear them daily. Look at that. Not just the animals that we hunt, but the rest of the ecosystem depicted by those silhouettes of raptors. I'm proud as hell of this. We didn't ask them to do this. They said to us, we'd like to do a shirt for you and donate 15% of the proceeds. And we haven't seen a check yet, but I know they've been selling the hell out of shirts. So pretty cool that I think it seems like this is a new paradigm. We're onto something different here. It's not just, ooh, look at the horns. And, you know, a biologist says, well, those are antlers, actually. Those are not horns. Anyway, we're moving beyond that. And this is on their website. Somebody mentioned Indiana earlier. Yeah. When we were on that trip to Indiana, we went down to Blank Park Zoo because they had mounted a campaign based on what they had learned from Leland Brown, one of our co-founders in Oregon. And look at this, Iowa hunters leading the way. And all the way down to pictures of the x-rays, pictures of shooting at an animal, cleaning the animal, eagles eating the animal, whatever it takes. And I just came up last week, I guess it was last week, we were out with Randy Newberg. We did a podcast with him. He said, hey, I'm interested in your cause. He's also a board member of Boone & Crockett. Isn't that unique and convenient? But while giving a presentation to Boone & Crockett, he said, I want to have you on my podcast. The positive notes and hits, and I don't know all the lingo for it, and my daughter's here to embarrass me later about it, but Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff, I had an account, and the responses were phenomenal. Thank you for the way in which you've engaged us on this issue and didn't beat us over the head with it. Very informative. I'll be making the switch. That's got us excited, and we need your help to spread the word. So, Randy said, for all of my life, I wanted to go be a falconer. And I had no idea that it was such a thing in the United States. We were like, heck yeah, it is. He said, I want to go hawking. We taught him the word, you know, to hawking. He goes, wait a second, hawking? You have the peregrine or deer? He's like, yeah, it's just hawking. That's okay. We're going to go hawking. So we just took Randy out and we did some duck hawking last week, and hopefully he has enough content to put it in a show to introduce people, his followers, to falconry and the heritage and the responsibility that goes with it, and then the transition into what have we learned about conservation along the way. All right, I'm going to end at that because I got more. Oh, no, I'm not. Here it is. That's what we can do. Just because I have to embarrass my young daughter before she leaves to go back to college in a couple days. And here's Anna with her non-lead bullet. And if you ever seen the magazine, what was it called? Strung?
Yes,
Strung magazine. You ever seen that? Check it out. There's a cool article about a young lady who used non-lead to harvest deer. I'll leave it at that. There's more, but I've kept you long enough as it is. Thanks for your time, and I'll take any questions if we have time.
have a few questions, actually. So the first one, you mentioned the size 6-7 shot.
Yep.
You said
I brought
how did it get
stickers,
in there.
too.
How did that end up getting into the condor? Did you find anything specific on that?
We didn't. But here's my theory, and condors generally focus on large carcasses. Rarely do we see them feed on things small. I've seen them feed on a duck down on Lee's Ferry on the river. But I think it could as easily be explained as there's a group of kids running around a pickup truck. They've got their shotguns. They're going to shoot some cans, some bottles, whatever. What if they found a bloated carcass? Can't get in trouble for shooting something already dead, right? Can't hurt. Could be that. And when I said that, I worked for the Arizona Game and Fish Department. Boy, did I get in trouble. I almost got fired. But I didn't want to be that biologist that says, no, we have no idea. Because I'm thinking, based on my own upbringing, things I did, stupid things I did. Well, who would think that that could be a bad thing? Let's shoot that bloated carcass and see what happens. Who's going to get closest, or something. I mean, it could be something stupid like that. Or it could be that maybe they're a little farther through their hunting explorations, and maybe they're calling coyotes. And they didn't have the right ammo that day, so they used what they have, because you buy it by the case, and it was, number 7s. I think that has to be the explanation, because those birds that got the major poisoning event during that time, it was in the summer, and the birds were proximate to the Grand Canyon. The bird died in the Grand Canyon, the first one that we found in the summer of 2000. And we had 13 other birds that had shot in their guns. So they got a load of a lot. And some of the wildlife managers that are good buddies of mine, they said, well, it could have been a pile of jackrabbits. I'm like, that would have had to have been a big pile of jackrabbits. And there's shooting that happens out spotlighting, and they do pile them up. But, we would find that. We track the condor so closely, we would find that. It's usually big cow carcasses. So, yeah, that's maybe one. Yes.
You mentioned when you shot 30 odd deer, you sent them to 30 different processors.
Mm-hmm. You're going to ask about the results of that, aren't you?
How much had left?
See, and this is combining so many different presentations. We could do one presentation on just those studies. 32% of the burger had lead in it.
Yes.
And those were all single shots.
Wow.
Yep, 32% of the burger. And when that paper was published, we caught hell from the NRA. Said we're fear mongering. I was like, sorry, I'm a hunter. I want my fellow hunters to go through the process I did of understanding that, so that they too can make more well-informed decisions. Notice I didn't tell them what to think. I just said, think. Here's some stuff to think about.
I worked at a deer processor as a teenager, so I have no doubt.
Yeah.
Exactly what happened there.
Yep.
So, I was wondering, was that study to simulate unrecovered deer, like the 11%?
No.
Okay.
The only reason I mentioned 11% is because the 80% of the condors that had very high levels of lead could not be explained by the 11% wounding loss.
Well, you had 90% in your study, and you said the ones that weren't were because
shot in the head.
Shot in the head.
Yep.
But if you're talking about a hunter, it's not taking something to a processor. He's going to dump the head of that deer too.
Oh, absolutely.
So 100% of your deer would have had
lead available to
had
scavengers. Yes, lead available to scavengers, exactly.
Right.
And so when we take, one of the incentives that we offer in Arizona and Utah is bring in your gut pile. If you didn't get a chance to get your non-lead sided in, or whatever the reason might be, bring us your gut pile and we'll dispose of it. And so we take them to a landfill and get them covered. That way the eagles that do come to the landfill there in southern Utah don't get at those carcasses.
Yeah. I was going to say, I would think that would be a bigger problem, because most people don't dispose of their gut pile properly. I know.
Oh, and coyotes.
We never did. We just dump them somewhere.
When we skinned coyotes, you just left them where you skinned them.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And we've found a lot of those out in the field by tracking condors.
So how about like ground squirrel / prairie dog varmint? We got a buddy who goes out and says, oh no, the bullet just goes right through them, they explode, there's nothing. But we thought, no, you're still leaving lead out there. I'm sure there's still fragmentation that occurs, even on those high velocity.
There's at least 4 papers on small game, and everything from rim fire all the way through to center fire varmint ammunition. Yep. So, and what I would do to just I'd look up those images from those papers and just share the images. If the person shows interest then and you've maybe piqued their interest, then show them the details of the paper. Or one of the best ways to do it, and people won't take you up on it probably, but just say, well, hey, let's just do a little study. Call your small animal vet somewhere out of a big city where there's not as many lawsuits, where they'll do it for you, and say, hey, would you x-ray these things for me? See if they'll be willing to do that, and if they're real proud of their rifle, bet them their rifle that there's more fragmentation than they think. See how confident they are in their assumptions. I do that at SHOT Show all the time. You have people, they're like, oh, it just goes right through them. I was like, that's what I thought too. Right? Have you ever x-rayed it? Or the more favorite one at the sportsman show is, stuff won't shoot out of my gun. It's like, well, when did you try it? There's new developments every year. What kind of gun is it? And then I'll tell them, I bet you I can get your gun to shoot non-lead as well as yours shoots.
Or better.
Lead. Better is, I don't say it yet, but we have two studies.
Damn good rounds out there.
We have two studies right now that we did blind surveys. So we invited members of the sporting groups to come out. This is Garyman Fish and the Peregrine Fund. We invited them to come out. They're going to publish it because I don't want them to have the Greenie Peregrine Fund that we've been labeled on the study. We'll just let Garyman Fish author this one. And we said varmint shooters, big game groups. We said bring your best shot with you. You're going to bring your gun. We'll provide the ammo. Nobody's going to know what each ammo is. It's all labeled. You're going to have 5 rounds, and they're going to shoot it. In both studies, they did one in Arizona and one in Oregon. The non-lead outperformed the lead from accuracy. That's going to be revolutionary, because then people aren't going to. And if you're comparing premium ammo, and we didn't shoot junk stuff on lead and then really good stuff, and we shot the good stuff in both, like Hornady, it was GMX and SST, or ELDX and Barnes, and anyway, we shot good ammo, and the cost is the same. I mean, Nosler Partition has been a fantastic bullet since it came out in the late 40s. It's still expensive. And a 30-06 168 grain Nosler Partition is more expensive than its non-lead counterpart. Go figure. It's because they developed a relationship that will sustain keeping it that high a price and keep making them money. Other questions? Yes, sir.
So other than x-ray, do you have any tools that you use to detect lead in a carcass?
No. It's, ask an old game ranger this. Metal detectors, they all carry a Garrett metal detector.
Right.
But it's not because it'll pick up lead. It'll pick up the copper before it picks up lead, because lead's not dense enough. So we are working on new technologies out now. We're doing a study with Harvard where we're studying the efficacy of using XRF X-ray technology. And it's a little handheld thing that they use in vivo in kids' bones. They take tibial samples and they just shoot it. It looks like a little price checker. And
a little more expensive.
Yeah, $30,000 price checker. Yeah, but we're experimenting with that. But we're hoping. I would love for the partnership to play a role in bringing together rehabilitators nationwide to develop protocols and procedures and all the wonderful words that I hate. To collect information both in vivo and post-mortem of all raptors that come in, so that we can establish a baseline lead level and figure out where those hot spots are, and work on those hot spots with this outreach and education to see if we can actually monitor a decline in that lead levels.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just proving there's a problem we want to do. We want to solve that problem, and I'd love to have the metrics to document our success in doing so. Yeah.
Just to respond to your question, it's not perfect. I lost a really good bird, so lost a really good bird to lead poisoning after she caught a jackrabbit last year. Yeah. And she died when ours was that 2 days later. So I also do a little prospecting. I have a gold metal detector. It's not the top of the line, it's a medium price. But I thought I'd try it. I did a lot of fooling around with lead shot, 22 bullets and stuff like that. And I found lead shot in a jackrabbit carcass.
Cool. Wow.
And it's not perfect. You've got to be right on it. Yep. Or you can find a larger bullet down in it. But so every jackrabbit I catch with my new finished Goss comes home with me, gets cut up, and gets metal detected.
Cool.
I could miss some. It's not perfect.
Yeah, see, I bought like a
It's pretty
$30
good.
one, and
No,
I
it's
didn't
not.
do anything. You know.
Yeah, this is a medium price, and I spent some money for it, but I spent a lot more money in my finished costs. I'm
Yeah.
pretty much in love with
You
it.
bet. That's where I say you gotta, you know, go with your local vet, see if they'll, you know, rehab facilities that are at a certain level, man, they need X-ray machines. You know, I mean, and digital X-ray. This is not the dark ages anymore. We should have those types of tools to be able to assess and you know, diagnose a bird. I mean, think of all the birds that have died from other causes, like collisions. Well, look at the effect that lead has on vertebrate systems. It begins to affect the nervous system, which affects motor skills, which affects, why did it have that collision? Man, yeah. Anyway, I'll jab to you guys all night, and I don't want to keep you longer. I already kept you long enough, but we do have a webpage now. You can go on the Peregrine Fund, Oregon Zoo, Game and Fish, Utah. They should all have links to the new partnership. And we're developing the tools and the kits necessary for if you're teaching a class. I know Jamaica, sorry.
I didn't call her that.
And then I'm gonna get in trouble from Jemima Perry Jones, and so I know Jemima really well, and we've done some work in India together. And every time I think Jamaica, whom I just met at the Eagle Meet, I say Jemima. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.